Breaking in the last 1 minute, 30 seconds actually, the government has lost the vote to try and suppress the Epstein, Mandelson, Keir Starmer files. Well, actually they didn't lose it because they couldn't afford to put it to the vote. So big was the feeling amongst all these hypocrites in Parliament who beamed so warmly at Peter Mandelson over so many decades. Now they're shocked, they tell you, horrified, they tell you, to discover that Peter Mandelson, the man known since the 1980s as the Prince of Darkness, was indeed the Prince of Darkness. But they made it clear to the government that they would not be supporting Keir Starmer's efforts to suppress these documents. And so now all correspondence between Mandelson and Keir Starmer and advisors, as they debated the pros and cons of appointing, I'm not making this up, a man who received, together with his boyfriend, then husband, he received £100,000 in cash from Jeffrey Epstein. He received untold amounts in hospitality, flights, accommodation, designer belts, clothes, who knows, even underpants, over decades. Peter Mandelson, who phoned Jeffrey Epstein in prison, who called Jeffrey Epstein and said, "When is Liberation Day?" Liberation Day, not of Auschwitz, but of the release from prison of a convicted child sex trafficker. How shall we celebrate it, says Peter Mandelson. And Epstein replies with a couple of strippers, although I'm not sure Mandy fully grasped that point. But the situation is now critical. The Epstein class is being swept away. Crowned heads are falling in Europe. National security advisors, United Nations individuals, members of governments, ambassadors in the case of Mandelson, and other ambassadors are, I understand, set to follow. This is a deluge. This is a kind of Versailles moment where the rotten ancien regime is suddenly swept away as a critical mass of opposition to it builds up, and they will hope to throw some sacrifices to the wolves like Mandelson. I mean, I just cannot. We've got a guest coming up, Mark Seddon, who will testify that both he and I knew who and what Mandelson was in the 1980s and struggled ceaselessly against his ever overweening influence within the British Labour Party and within the Labour governments of Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and then Keir Starmer. We warned you all, and I find it so amusing to see journalists and broadcasters who literally fawned over Peter Mandelson for 4 decades, now telling us that he's a traitor, that he's let down his country, that he's let down his party. If only they had known then what they know now, and all of this guff. Surely nobody will buy it. Keir Starmer not only knew who and what Peter Mandelson was, so did every journalist and every broadcaster in this country. Keir Starmer depended on Peter Mandelson, as Gordon Brown did, as Tony Blair did, as Neil Kinnock did. That's how old this story is. I've been rereading this afternoon Mr. Ben's diaries from the 1980s, 18 months into Peter Mandelson's increasingly tight hold on power in the British Labour Party. And Mr. Ben opines over and over what a danger to British politics, the British political class, was Peter Mandelson, but the journalists who were supposed to hold him to account, the broadcasters, instead of holding him to account, obeyed his orders to remove people from television programs, including Mr. Benn, one of the giants of British politics, removed from television programs after a telephone call from Peter Mandelson asking them to do so. But the British end of this story doesn't end at Peter Mandelson. This may sweep the British royalty, the British monarchy, away, because it wasn't just Prince Andrew, although, boy, was it Prince Andrew. We just learned of a threesome, how gruesome, a threesome between Jeffrey Epstein, Prince Andrew, and a prostitute. Doesn't get any more lurid than that, does it? But it isn't just Prince Andrew. Epstein had the run of Buckingham Palace. Epstein had the run of the Queen's private airfield. Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were cavorting around the royal lodges in Windsor, in Balmoral. And actually, they had Harvey Weinstein with them once or twice. What company the British royals have been keeping. And of course, Prince Charles. What can I say about him without lèse-majesté? What can I say about him without YouTube suppressing, as they've suppressed this poll that we're running this evening? Imagine suppressing a poll on YouTube. What can I say about the king? Well, let me just tell you that the number one male influence in his life was Lord Mountbatten, a notorious paedophile, a revolting degenerate. Lord Mountbatten practically brought King Charles up. But I need to move on to the American end of the story, which is, of course, very much more important. Donald Trump's acting as if none of this is happening. He keeps giving press briefings. I mean, is he ever doing anything other than giving press briefings? Does Donald Trump ever actually sit down and think? I'm not going to suggest that he sits down and read, because we all know he's never read a book in his life. Never written one either, but that's another matter. Donald Trump, in his incessant, ceaseless press briefings, is acting like this, none of this is happening, and hoping that the complicit media, which is so utterly compromised by the whole Epstein affair, will go along with his pretense that none of this is happening. But on social media, there is a deluge, a tsunami of releases, of analysis, and never was it more obvious that in the media there are two entirely separate worlds. There's the world that William Hague inhabits, although he is seeking to inhibit. He inhabits a world in which he can say, as he did this evening, social media is incompatible with a democratic society, when of course the truth is the opposite. Democratic society has died precisely because of the establishment media cabal. I'm going to call them that word. The establishment media cabal has sought but failed to keep the people's minds on looking over there. They're trying to Russiagate the Epstein affair. It was Putin what done it. It was Putin that forced all these British journalists and broadcasters to beam so brightly and warmly at Peter Mandelson's return to the front line as look at them. If you knew British journalists, every single towering pillar of British journalism is in that picture, grinning at Peter Mandelson as he takes a bow before him as he takes up office as British ambassador in Washington. Only little Beth Rigby there has declined to beam and smile. It was Putin that made them do all this. It was Putin that made these royals in Norway, in Sweden, in Denmark, in Britain cavort with Jeffrey Epstein. It was Putin that made these people accept all that money from Jeffrey Epstein. It was Putin that forced them onto the Lolita Express to commit God knows what crimes against what children and young girls and boys on Epstein's island. It was Putin that done it, don't you know? That jug-eared halfwit Andrew Marr, formerly of sundry Trotskyite organizations, gave a monologue today in which he accused Russia and the KGB, which ceased to exist, of course, many decades ago. Actually ceased to exist before most of this even happened. It was the KGB what done it, according to the London local radio station LBC and the former BBC editor of politics, Andrew Marr. Is anybody buying this? It was Putin that was putting his dick in these little girls on Epstein's island? Seriously? The truth is, what Professor Morandi said here on my last show, he coined the phrase, picked up by Bernie Sanders today, I see, the Epstein class. The Epstein class has been ruling us for decades, but no longer. Everybody associated with seeking to cover up the truths in the Epstein affair, everyone associated with trying to make people look at Russia instead of Israel and the CIA, everybody who ever cavorted with Jeffrey Epstein, took his hospitality, took his money, took his plane to his island, and defiled the innocence of young girls and boys, will never work again. They'll never work again unless you're all stupid, unless you all are prepared to be ruled by the Epstein class. They'll never work again. Peter Mandelson did not commit suicide. Jeffrey Epstein did not commit suicide. Peter Mandelson is the most vengeful man I have ever known. When this dust settles, be sure that Mandelson will settle scores with all of his friends that betrayed him, including little Wesley Streeting, who, together with his mum, was Peter Mandelson's biggest fan, who was a schoolboy protege, nod, nod, wink, wink, of Peter Mandelson. He's turned against Peter Mandelson. Wait till Peter takes his revenge upon him. What's the guy in Brighton? Kyle, Peter Kyle. As close as could possibly be with Peter Mandelson. Nod, nod, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. He's turned against him. Keir Starmer, who knew everything, but who still sent Mandelson to Washington as ambassador, has turned against him, called him a traitor, called in the cops. Peter Mandelson will undoubtedly go to prison. Mandelson may die in prison. The charges of influence peddling, of treason, of multiple breaches of the Official Secrets Act, of payola, of leaking state secrets and government information for money. Peter Mandelson may die in prison, but he will not commit suicide. If Peter Mandelson is found dead, trust me, he did not commit suicide. And moreover, from prison, We'll have prison diaries to rival Gramsci, to rival Oscar Wilde. Mandelson will sing like a nightingale about each and every one of his erstwhile friends who hath abandoned him. But I heard a guy on CNN, Gayatri will remember his name, she'll remind me later, an English guy, bald, talking about the rise and now fall of Peter Mandelson. And he actually uttered the word. It is a mystery, he said, how such a man could have beguiled the political class for so long. But he knows, I know, and now you know, that there was no mystery at all. Mandelson, a Zionist, a supporter of the state of Israel, was heaven sent to Jeffrey Epstein. This was an Israeli intelligence operation from the beginning, and I don't just mean the Mandelson affair. I mean the takeover of the British Labour Party. I mean the state capture of British politics. I mean the state and media capture of British broadcasting. I mean the destruction of the meteor that was Jeremy Corbyn and his brief leadership of the Labour Party. Peter Mandelson said that he wakes up every day determined to do everything that he can to destroy Jeremy Corbyn. This he said as a member of the Labour Party and as a grandee, moreover. This Israeli intelligence operation, there is the Epstein class, not the Epstein files, not the Epstein affair, not just Jeffrey Epstein, but the Epstein class of politicians and journalists has so poisoned our body politic that it is difficult to see how from it we can possibly recover. But we have to try. Otherwise, we accept that our countries are finished, our democracy is dead, our liberties and freedoms are otiose. Now, in the course of this show, it may very well be that the talks between the United States and Iran having broken down, that military action begins against Iran. If it does, you'll be the first to hear of it, and you'll be the first to hear what it might mean for the region and the world. But coming up is Mark Seddon, a 45-year friend of mine, former editor of the socialist newspaper Tribune, former advisor to the Secretary General of the United Nations, former member of the Labour Party's National Executive Committee, where he sat alongside Peter Mandelson. But most importantly, and the badge of honour that he carries, one of the very first people in the world to tell everyone that would listen, sadly too few of them, just exactly the disaster that Mandelson would lead the British Labour Party. Mark Seddon coming up after this. Stay tuned.